blood is strong, the heart is Highland. From all over the world, Scotsmen and Highlanders came in festival year to the greatest clan gathering ever held. As they marched through the streets of the grey old city of Edinburgh, there was no doubt that on that occasion, the heart of the capital was certainly Highland. But they were in the lowlands. For their own countryside, they must travel to the north, across the waters of the Firth of Forth. Here was the land from which the forefathers of these returning clansmen had originally come. To pass from the lowlands to the Highlands of Scotland is to cross a border country which marks almost as sharp a difference as that between Scotland and England. Here is the real north, the dark, true, the tender north. This is the land of the Grampians, the great mass of mountains that lie between Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, and Inverness, the capital of the Highlands. It is a wild, romantic, and often desolate landscape, but full of great beauty. The moorland stretches for miles in all directions. There are long, deep lochs and a mass of mountains. We know that these are amongst the oldest hills in the world. Nonetheless, the moorland does come right down to the edge of the little townships and gatherings of mankind. Here, the arrival and departure of the bus is a big event. The Highland folk, even though they are not themselves travelling, gather round to hear and to pass on the news. Some of them do so in English, some in the old Highland tongue of Gaelic. And in that language, there is a saying that, when God made time, he made plenty of it. But even here, the bus has to keep to schedule. That's not a bad salmon. The fisherman's taking home with him, and he knows it. When God made time, he made plenty of it. Ah, but they're all in now. The fisherman, the farmer, the housewife, the farmer's wife, and the children. And so, well primed with instructions, the bus driver takes his passengers on their journey. He takes them by lochside, by riverside, and under the shadow of the hills. And every now and again, he has to stop to act as a kind of unofficial postman. The district nurse is a very important figure in the Highland community. She's making quite sure that her message is going to be delivered. Bus routes go through scenery of great beauty, scenery which hasn't changed much with the years. But one thing has changed, and that is travel. Getting about in this part of the world was not always as easy as it is today. Sometimes in our modern journey, we see a reminder of the past when it took many days or sometimes weeks to cross this countryside. This is the old road, which was built in an attempt to pacify the Highlands by General Wade after the rising of 1715. Today, a new road capable of carrying tens of thousands of buses and motor cars a year leaps and stretches across the moor of Rannoch and into the dark defile of Glen Coe, the Glen of Weeping. Beside it, and like a ghost from the past, the old road meanders and turns its ancient way. Not everyone lives in the little townships which can be reached by the roads. there are further places, farms amongst the hills to which the bus cannot go. For the sake of these, there are wayside boxes where messages as well as letters are left for some of the remotest workers on the mainland of Britain, the northern Scottish sheep farmers. Don't really need to look quite so puzzled and unhappy as all that. At the end of this uncomfortable journey, they will find themselves let loose on an island off the west coast belonging to the sheep farmer. Here for months on end, they will remain undisturbed lords of their own domain. Sheep farming, though now a traditional Highland way of life, is not an ancient one. It's only about 200 years old. But there has come into the Highlands something even more modern than the modern sheep on the hills. For amongst these same hills, and in the strength of the waters that move in them, there was the possibility of an even newer way of life for the Highlander. A possibility dreamed of by only a few visionaries. Its name is hydroelectric power. Man has now harnessed the power of the storm and the rains which fill the waterways of this mountainous district. As this new loch came into being, a number of old things sank and disappeared from man's eyes, possibly forever. Abandoned houses, trees, fences, gates, occasional fields, and other signs of man's habitation. And here and there an old road is swallowed up in the rising tide of man-made loch water. Indeed, one very famous old road in parts now disappears straight into the waters of the loch, which man has made for his own use. It is the road to the Isles. The old road has gone, but the water which has covered it now provides power far greater than the power of all the traffic which has passed over it for centuries. But it is not only in the waters of the Highlands that modern resources lie. On these great rolling hillsides, some of them now stripped bare of their trees, there is soil which in the days of Nelson helped to produce the wooden walls of Britain. We no longer build our ships of wood, but there are many other uses to which it can be put, and forestry is one of the most important and growing industries in this part of Scotland. These young trees must be enclosed within enormous plantations and regularly tended. From the days of the great Caledonian forest, there have been trees in the Highlands, and there have been men to make use of them. But until recently, the care of trees was not practiced with any planning for the future in the Highlands of Scotland. Now, whole new communities of foresters have come to settle and to develop an old source of wealth. These new forests provide shelter for abundant wildlife, and the gamekeeper and the woodman often work in alliance on their own separate jobs. A Highland gamekeeper is almost as much a creature of the woods and moorland as are the birds and animals in his charge. He carries his gun to destroy their enemies, the vermin, the foxes, the stoats, and the weasels. He knows the secret ways of the forest and can from close to watch the shy, elusive deer. Skiing is a comparatively new sport in the Highlands, but it is one that has attracted many hardy enthusiasts from all over Britain. In these northern parts of our island, skiing is by no means solely a winter sport, for this is June. Another newcomer is the hiker. Of course, there have always been mountain climbers, but they were not so long ago regarded as rare and adventurous spirits. Today, the mountain scenery of Scotland is open and accessible to the youth of the country. Upon every weekend in spring, summer, autumn, and in some years during the winter, the young people of the towns of Scotland pour out into the Highlands to wander along the old hill paths, to climb the trackless mountains, to fish in the streams and burns, to camp beneath the stars in the open air, and, perhaps most ardently of all, to enjoy the unsurpassed beauties of the scenery. And what scenery it is, too! Along a sea coast as beautiful as any in Europe, the traveller will see some of the old castles which have fallen into decay and disuse. Some have been destroyed in the clan warfare which once ravaged the Highlands. Their gaunt shells remain to speak to us silently of the more turbulent Highland past. But he will also see some, like Castle Urquhart on the shores of Loch Ness, which are still comparatively undamaged, and some like Ellandonan on the west coast that are still inhabited. Amongst the most famous of the inhabited castles of Scotland is Glamis, which lies upon the eastern border of the Highlands. Scottish baronial in origin, it bears traces of French chateau influence, reminding us of the days when there was an old alliance between Scotland and France, and when stonemasons and builders, as well as students and scholars, showed this alliance in their work. The crypt of the castle is nearly 1,000 years old. Macbeth was Thane of Glamis, and the structure of this dark and eerie room can't have changed much since his day. Next to the crypt, there is a room which Shakespeare has made famous. It is the room in which Duncan, King of Scots, was murdered by Macbeth. Methought I heard a voice cry, "Sleep no more. Glamis hath murdered sleep. Macbeth shall sleep no more." James V, a later king of Scotland, surveys the scene. About the crypt, and in the drawing room of the castle, the present day mingles with the more recent past of 300 years ago, as the date on this beautifully moulded ceiling announces. The fireplace is of the same age, but the more modern furnishings show that the room is still very much a living room today. Portraits belonging to the illustrious family that has owned Glamis Castle look down upon the room which their descendants now inhabit. Further upstairs there is a room which of recent years has become as famous as Duncan's room, but for happier reasons. This was the bedroom of the late Countess of Strathmore of the family of Bowes-Lyon, which has owned Glamis for 500 years. The Strathmore arms are embroidered at the head of the bed, and on the canopy there are stitched the names and birth dates of Lady Strathmore's children. Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, now Her Gracious Majesty, the Queen Mother. But modern life in Scotland doesn't rest only on a romantic past and romantic scenery. One of the main centres of Highland life is Inverness, the capital of the north. And here there are newspapers whose main business it is to report that life. The circulation of a Highland newspaper may not by the standards of the big national dailies be large, but it carries news to and from a large area, and it has to keep in touch with many present-day activities between the Atlantic Islands on the west and the North Sea on the east. Separated by the hills and in the different glens and valleys, these activities go to make news in the Highlands of today. For instance, what happens in the Caledonian Canal, one of the most important waterways in Britain, is news in the Highlands. The canal connects the Atlantic with the North Sea and joins the fishing waters of the east and the west. Highland cattle are famous all the world over in romantic paintings. But these magnificent beasts have a more practical interest for the farmers who rear them and who bring them to market. Rob Roy, the freebooter of the hills and his clansmen of the past, were in their lawless ways primitive ranchers. They would be surprised to learn of the thriving modern industry that has grown out of their old pursuit. Ushkiabeha, the water of life, or better known in simple English as whiskey. The best whiskey in the world is still drunk in the Highlands of Scotland and is still Scotch. And you'll come across small townships devoted to the manufacture of aluminium, for there are new industries in these mountainous regions. All this the traveller and the tourist can see for himself. Clansmen saw when they came from overseas for their great gathering in the mother country, the country which gave their forefathers birth. From the lone Feeling and the misty island, mountains divide us and a waste of seas, but still the blood is strong, the heart is Highland, and we in dreams behold the Hebrides.